Jason, would love to learn more about the courageous decision that you made recently, really at an intersection in your career, right? I mean, you've done a lot of things in your career. You started off as a chemical engineer. You've been in sales for a long time. You've had a lot of success. You've navigated the world of startups and large enterprise. But recently, you found yourself, I guess, at an intersection in your career. I'd love to dig into that a little bit and your decision-making behind it and what went into the final decision that you made.
Yeah, thanks. So recently I just had to figure out what I was going to do for my next job. And I went through a lot of soul searching. I actually took the summer off to think about it and really figure it out. Even talked to some executive coaches, talked to some friends, family, my wife, and wanted to figure out what's the next right step for me. Because I think you get to a point in your career when you start jumping and jumping and jumping, and you're not being as thoughtful and deliberative as you really should be. And so I wanted to figure out what mattered most to me, what was actually going to make me happy, not what I thought would make me happy, not the romantic ideal of what would make me happy, but what was actually going to be something that I could go and sink my teeth into and enjoy doing for the next 3, 5, 7 years, whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, and you said, I want to jump on two things there because I thought that was really interesting. You said people start jumping, maybe like a little less intentional about some of the decisions. Do you think that's tied into some sort of romanticism or some sort of fantasy about what they think that job will be? Is that why you think there might be those type of trends?
Yeah, I mean, we live in this world where we hear about the next unicorn startup. And everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to join this company, and it's going to be $1 billion company, and I'm going to be a millionaire, and life's going to be great. And people get really excited about that and get wrapped up in it. And like I live here in Austin, Texas, right? This has been a startup town for as long as I can remember. And I've done startups, both good and bad. And I always love the idea of it. And I always think, wow, this could be the next unicorn. But as I'm going through this process, I'm thinking through, well, what does that really involve? And how many years is it going to take to get there? And, are we going to get the lucky breaks? Because, and I hate to tell you, but all these companies aren't successful because they didn't, because everybody just worked hard and went right. They got lucky breaks, right place, right time, right connection, right whatever. And what you need is a combination of the right people, the right processes, the right technology, and a little bit of luck. And you can't overstate the amount of input luck has in it. And I've been moderately lucky. I've had some really good ones, and I had some that weren't so good. And
so it kind of sobered you up a little bit, maybe. Like I like where you're going with this because you didn't swing all the way to the other side of pessimism and cynicism, right? Like this doesn't work. It sounds like you were trying to carve out some sort of new thinking around it. You were looking at the decisions you made, and you were willing to evaluate them.
Yeah, and I thought, I like new things, but at the same time, I like infrastructure around me. And I think different people thrive in different environments, right? I always kind of say there's the person who gets you from 0 to 1. They're going to figure out how to make your first sale. And I think that's really hard. And it takes usually a lot of no's, a lot of doors slammed, a lot of making stuff up, and selling a little over your skis ahead of what your company can actually do. And I've done that, but it takes a lot out of you. Then there's the 1 to 10. All right, we've sold a customer. Now let's see if we can go replicate this and get 10 customers to go into the same thing we're doing. That's sort of proving that you've nominally got a product market fit. Then there's the 10 to 100. This is, all right, I think we've got it. We still got to do some tweaking, but now we're going to get from 10 customers to 100 customers. And now we're going to start to scale and start to put into place the tools and processes we need so that we can really blow this thing out and become the next unicorn. Then the next spot from there is 100 to 1,000 customers. And that's when you're really into just cranking the wheel and scaling the crap out of your company. And what's really interesting to me is that 10 to 100 space. It's, all right, we've figured something out. We've sold to a couple customers. We've got something that makes sense. Now we need to figure out how do we replicate this and how do we really grow it and turn it from a bespoke model to a machine. So I kind of want to build the machine.
So they've attained some level of product market fit, and you're trying to figure out if that is scalable, right? If it's repeatable, scalable and repeatable. Is this are we a niche, or can this really go more mainstream? Is that what you're saying?
Not as much figure it out as we're going to figure it out.
We're going to figure it out, yeah.
And build the engine. So I'm not the guy who's figuring out how to make gasoline. I'm not the guy figuring out how to make a car, but I'm like, all right, what's the best way we can put this car together so when we get it on the road, it's going to go fly.
What do you like about that phase, the 10 to 100? Is it the adrenaline? Is it like you have some resources, the organization has a team? Like, what is it that you like about that specific range?
So a couple of things. One, it's a place with a lot of freedom and a lot of responsibility. you're not just following somebody else's playbook, you're building the playbook as you go. But you're not building it from scratch because there's already proof points, there's already customers. So it's not really the creating from nothing, right? But it's also not just following somebody else's plan. It's actually building that plan that if you do it right, the company is going to follow probably for the next 5 years as they grow and follow that until they get to a scale where they've got to reevaluate how to do that. That's not to say you're not always reevaluating and streamlining and fixing what you're doing, but this is basically setting the stage for the company to grow for the next 5 years. And that, I really like that. And again, it's not get one person to buy from you. It's, all right, I think we have something real. Now let's build an organization around it and then build a team around it. And then train up those teams so that not only are they doing a great job today, but they become your next generation of leaders.
So it's both things. It's expand the market and the human side of building the team. Is that correct? I mean, it's both those two elements that you find really appealing and intriguing.
It is. I like solving hard problems, but I also really like coaching people and helping people take their next steps. As I'm going through this process, I got interviewed by, I can't tell you how many people. And a lot of them ask me, what's the thing I'm most proud of? And I know they're all expecting me to mention some deal where I crushed it and we blew our numbers out. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that, I've gotten probably almost half the people who ever worked for me promoted.
No way.
Their next job, their next leadership level, whatever it was the next thing they needed. I put a lot of pride in making sure that people who work for me get to that level they need to be. And they don't always get there. And I'm not, telling you that I can take anybody and make them amazing, but it's weeding out people who are in the right spot, who aren't in the right spot, or who can move on to the next thing and helping them get there. And if they're willing to put in the work, I'm willing to do whatever I can to help them get there.
Are you a little bit like I know you like basketball, so I'm going to try. I'll probably butcher this analogy, but I'll try. Are you a little bit like a Phil Jackson? You can work with many different types of people. Your job is to find the best in them, bring it out, coach it. Am I on the right track here, loosely?
So Phil Jackson was great, but Phil Jackson ran one system. He ran the triangle offense with every team he ever had. And he happened to work with, Michael and Scotty, with Kobe and Shaq. So he had people who could go do it. But I always felt like, even though he was the Zen master and amazing at motivating people, he had one way of doing things. The guy that I actually like a little more, believe it or not, is Steve Kerr. Even though he's a much newer coach, he's only won a couple of championships, but he walked into a system in Golden State where they had some great athletes, but they were stifled. And he figured out how to get everybody involved and make everybody better there. There was no, even though they had Steph Curry and then they had Kevin Durant, the system was designed around passing the ball, sharing, and making everyone better and everybody chipping in. And the thing that jumps out most about him is that, after they won a championship, he had back surgery and he was out for a month. And during the month he was out, they went on a winning streak. I don't even know if they lost for like a month and a half of games.
Wow.
And this interesting topic arose, which was, wow, how good of a coach is he? And do we really need him? Because they're winning even without him. And I looked at that and I said, no, this guy's the greatest coach ever because he's done such a good job instilling this culture of winning, this way of working together and playing, this team concept where whether he's there or not, they continue to do the right things and they're out there on autopilot just getting better and better and better. But then when he comes back, he's like, wow, you guys have all leveled up. Now let me focus on the next thing that's going to take you to the next level.
That's right. That's right. Did you have these type of realizations that the 10 to 100 and this type of realizations going into the summer as you were about to make some big decisions in your career, or did they come to you?
A lot of this is frameworks I've had for a long time, and what I've learned about coaching is that they're not going to tell you anything you don't know. What they're going to do is help you come realize it and bring it to your forefront and make sure you're conscious about thinking about these things. So the 1 to 10, 10 to 100 framework, I might have read that somewhere. I might have come up with that, but I've known about that for a very long time. The other main framework I use in thinking about these things is what I call the 7 for 7 philosophy. And 7 for 7 is all about figuring out what your 7 most important things are. And those can be characteristics in a job. They can be characteristics in, a girlfriend or husband or wife. They can be whatever it is you're evaluating, making sure that the most important factors to you, you get a 70% passing grade on all of them. Because I've been in situations, and I've seen a lot of situations where somebody's a 10, 10, 2, 10, 10. And that too, ultimately is the death of that relationship or that job or whatever it is, because it's something that you said, this is critical to me. It has to be good, and it's not. You'd rather be passing across the board than A's in all your classes and failing one of them.
Yeah.
And that was true in school growing up. It's kind of where I came up with the idea. And I think it's true now. So when I looked around and figured out what do I want to do and where am I going to fit, my criteria came down to, I want to work at a mid-sized growing company, ideally somewhere between 20 and 50 million, working on getting up there to 100 million. Then I want a role where I'm, making a difference and impact. I'm not just managing a team. I'm not an individual contributor. I'm actually setting our strategy. I'm actually figuring out how we're getting it, and I'm building this engine that we're going to drive for the next 5 years. So it had to be the right role at the right company. And then it had to be something new that they're doing, not just taking over for somebody else, not just expanding to a new territory, but literally a whole new sales motion, a whole new product, a whole new way of doing things that I could make up along with my team, but be influenced by and supported by the history and the additional products, whatever else they've got in the background, so that we're not out here on an island like a true startup.
Yeah. So, absolutely. So clearly differentiated value proposition, a proven differentiated value proposition, absolutely. I'm going to jump into that because that's super interesting. Back to your 7 for 7 for a second, because I think this is really interesting. This might be yours. I don't think I've heard of this before. Can you give me an example of where you had six 70%ers, but then you had one that wasn't? And just kind of give an example of a situation where maybe you overrode your own instincts. You rationalized and justified, and it didn't, quite work out the way you hoped.
So I've done that. I'd probably say on multiple occasions I did that earlier in my career. When I did a really good startup pretty early on, and then I was looking for that same magic over and over again. And I find things that I would ignore it and say, you know what, it's going to be okay. And one of the interesting lessons is I joined a company where I couldn't explain to my wife what they did. And my wife is a tech venture capitalist. She's very smart. She understands business better than anybody I know. And when she couldn't understand it, I said, no, you just don't get it because it's outside of your world. She works in healthcare, and this was in social media. What I realized is that everything, if I can't explain it, like you're a 4-year-old, then I really don't understand it. And if I can't explain it like you're a 4-year-old and you still don't get it, there might be something wrong with the underlying business premise. And so ever since then, I've learned from my mistakes. I realized that I've got to make sure that whatever it is, not only makes sense to me, but also makes sense to her. It might even make sense to my mom. Make sure that you can explain what you're doing in a way that people go, yeah, I get it. That makes sense. There's something there. And that requires two things. One, I have to understand it well enough to explain it that well. But two, it means that I'm solving a problem that people not necessarily deep into the tech world get, but in a way that they really make sure that they understand what I'm talking about. Now, when you talk about that in terms of the 7 for 7, it was one of the categories is this a sellable product? Right? Is this something I think the world needs? And if smart people don't understand it, it's probably not something the world needs, or you're too ahead, or you're too behind. You can have the right product in the wrong timing, and it's not the right thing.
That's funny you say that, because I remember once in our business, I pitched my bank tell on our value proposition, and they got it. There was actually, it was kind of a seminal moment of oh yeah, they get it. And not my bank tell was super smart, obviously, but they're not in my business. They're not in my world. They got it. And you could tell they got it. They weren't placating. They weren't being nice. So yeah. I love that example. Okay, so you're going into the summer. Now you identified a series of ranges, 10 to 100, $50 million, established value proposition. What about when you're looking at these companies, how do you gauge if the people are really serious about the type of growth that you want to do, which I'm sure is a little explosive and aggressive and fast-paced, or whether you're being given lip service, right? I mean, I'm not saying they're lying to you, but maybe they're not quite as in tune what is going to be required. How do you tell the difference?
So I've made that mistake before. I joined a company where they said all the right things and they wanted to grow. And what I realized is, just like the second law of motion, which is an object in motion stays in motion, an object at rest stays at rest. Companies have what I call institutional inertia. And it's really important to dive into them and figure out what are they doing to overcome that inertia. And so previously I joined a company where they said, oh, we're going to change everything. And the CEO was the same CEO who'd been there for 15 years. And I hate to say it, but people don't change a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And what I should have realized is as long as he was there, that company probably wasn't really going to change because he didn't want it to. He wasn't going to let it. And the obstacles I ran into were that as we would change things and come up against new obstacles, it's fine, don't worry about it. Oh, it's okay. That's not how we do stuff. And that's never a good answer.
Yeah.
I never want to be at a place where, well, that's just the way we've always done it, is an answer. That's a good question. Here's why we do it that way. Okay, that makes sense. We can move on. But if they're not open to reevaluating the way they're doing things, then they're not looking to change. So if I was looking for a company that was a turnaround, they had to have a new CEO. That was absolutely critical. They had to justify to me why they wanted to change. So when you're interviewing for a job, you're interviewing the company at least as much as they're interviewing you.
Yeah.
Because, this is a marriage. We're going to be together for a long time. And the job I took, I interviewed the CEO, CMO, CTO, head of product, you name it. I talked to everybody to find out what they were doing. And I asked some very pointed questions about, you guys tell me you want to change. How do I know that? Why are you changing and why now? And I got really good answers. And I thought about it a lot and I really liked the people. And at the end of it, I decided these guys give me the right answers. And I feel like they're on the right path. And they were, in the process of the interview, I would tell them they were wrong about something. And the next conversation we'd have, they'd reference that and say, actually, we thought about it. And here's how we want to go forward with the idea that you gave us.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So
yeah.
You can tell, are they receptive to new ideas by how do they take your feedback in real time? And just like they should be gauging you, right? If you pitch an idea, they go, no, that's terrible. And you come back again, you go, no, you really have to do it my way. I'm right. You're also not listening to them. So you got to make sure that you guys are in the same place at the same time on the same path.
Yeah, it's like humility. You both are teachable, both could be wrong. Absolutely. I'm kind of curious, how much of your decision is data versus intuition? And do you consider intuition to be data?
So intuition is data that you can't quantify. I work in the field of AI, right? It's all about data. And then we start talking about big data and unstructured data. And your intuition is simply your brain processing unstructured data in a way that you haven't figured out how to quantify yet.
Okay.
I've seen examples where people have actually gone through the trouble and tried to understand what it is. And what we realize is that your gut is a series of if-then statements going on in your head. And you're following down that path and getting to, okay, I've seen enough data. This makes sense. This checks all the other boxes. It's a yes or it's a no. You're doing that very quickly, and you're doing it based on your experience and your intuition, but there is data behind that. And if you really sit down and think about your gut, you can probably start to quantify where a lot of that information comes from. I'm not saying you can put it in a spreadsheet, but you can start getting the idea of, well, I felt this. Being in the world of sales, I've read tons and tons of books about behavior, about psychology, and a lot of this stuff goes back to actual clinical studies where they tell you if people do this, then this, if people do that, then that. You'll read books that tell you if somebody's got their arms crossed, they're negative. That's oversimplification. You got to understand, do they normally have their arms crossed or not? Are they cold?
Yeah.
Do they try to put their hands in their pockets and then say, oh, I guess I'll just cross my arms? Or are they looking at you sternly, not really paying attention with their arms crossed, saying, you're telling me things I don't want to hear? So you're taking in all these different factors to decide, is this person really listening to me? Are they really open or not? Your gut works the exact same way. You've just got to break down what are all the things you're thinking about and what's going into this decision. And you go, you know what? Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, it's not to take out the role of emotion, because most decisions are still emotionally made. You make decisions emotionally, you justify them analytically.
Yeah.
But I also think emotions are writing the same kind of, fuzzy logic as your gut is. Your emotion are going, you know what? I think this, I like this sounds like fun. And then deciding that based on these criteria, your emotions play a certain way. You got less control over it, and it's a lot more, whatever the word is, autonomous, not the word, but you know what I mean, than your traditional, follow your analytics path. But it's still going on your history, your feel, the stuff, the nonverbal communications, the things you're picking up that are very different than the part of your logical brain. But that doesn't mean that the conclusion is any less valid. In fact, it might be more valid because it's not getting confused by the numbers. And, you hear the saying, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, right?
Yep. I think that was Benjamin Disraeli, if I'm not mistaken. I think, yes, it's a great quote. No, I view like intuition like the wind. You can't see it, but you can see the effects, right? I mean, it's not a perfect analogy, but I told you. So you have now, you've identified a type of company you work for. You've discussed the type of culture that you'd like to see, especially around decision-making, input, and so forth. But there are two more areas that I really like to dive into. One is, which is you like going looking for problems. So does that mean that there are times when you come across a super interesting problem and you have the, I guess, realization to say, you know what, I'm not the right person for this? Is that part of your decision making as well when you're looking at problems that intrigue you?
If it intrigues me, then I'm probably the right person. If it doesn't intrigue me, I'm probably not. And when I think about what makes a good salesperson, number one to me is curiosity. I want to just figure out, understand everything about you, your business. What makes you tick? How does your business work? How do things happen that are going to make you successful? And then how can I support that? The second thing is empathy. It's not about making your company successful. If I'm selling to you, it's actually about making you, Ruben, successful. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with people. And I tend to look at a lot of this stuff in the same way. It's, all right, is this an interesting problem I care about? Are these people I care about? Are their customers something I care about? And I turned down a job that was solving a problem I know how to solve. So it took a little of the challenge out of it in a field where I didn't feel like I was doing good. And that took some of the shine off of it. And so when I started looking across my 7 for 7, it had two things that dropped below that 7. And I just said, you know what? Not the right job, even though they offered me more money than the job I took.
But it takes some courage when you come up with your 7 for 7, because I think it's a great framework. And that's why I love we're having this conversation, because I think other people, that's the whole premise of this show, that courageous decisions, making courageous decisions, is that others can learn from it. They don't feel stuck or alone. It takes some courage, though, once you come up with your 7 points to stick to them, doesn't it? I mean, there are a lot of temptations along the way, or fear, right? I mean,
so as you get older, I kind of hate to say experience teaches you, but experience teaches you that your gut tells you what are the most important things to do. And it might not be 7. It might be 3. It might be 5. I don't care how many it are. It is. Okay. But however many it is, those are the things that matter to you. And once you decide on them and you're set on them, don't compromise, because that's when you get into trouble. As soon as you start slipping down it's okay. That one's actually not that important. If it's not that important, take it off the board. But don't tell me it's important and then tell me it's not that big a deal. Yeah. So it really requires self-discipline and self-reflection to understand what matters to you. And again, it's not me telling you what your criteria should be. You decide your own criteria.
But then stick to it. Have integrity.
Stick to it.
Okay. So this summer, you are going through this transition and options come your way, right? I mean, attractive options start showing up on your doorstep. You start meeting companies, talking to companies. How did the 7 for 7 play out? And do you believe in any form of tests, like standardized tests, to help make these type of decisions?
So interestingly enough, the job I ended up taking came my way because a friend of mine interviewed for the job and said, you know what, I'm not your guy, but I know who is, and introduced me. Because he looked at it and said, this isn't a problem I want to solve. But I think Jason would be interested in it, so he hooked me up with the CEO. We had a conversation, loved what he was doing, hit it off, and then we spent another month and a half, interviewing with various people at the company, going back and forth, making sure that we were going along the right path. So I had a lot of time to evaluate all this. And, my 7 for 7 even evolved during the process, because I was still talking to other companies and doing other things. And, as I'd have more conversations, I would learn more and more about myself. So a lot of these companies want you to do some kind of psychological test or profile or even intelligence test or any of this stuff. And I generally find this stuff kind of fun. I personally enjoy it, so I don't mind doing it. One company in particular, where I was looking at being their chief revenue officer, asked me to do one that was about 6 hours of testing.
I'm not laughing. It's powerful stuff, but it's still, it's 6 hours, right? I mean, it's a little intense, yeah.
First of all, that is way too much. And if I hadn't been on vacation, I would have just said, guys, I do not have time for this. I'm sorry. But they were really serious about making sure that their top 3 executives were on the same page. And I kind of appreciated that. And at the time, I really was interested in them. But as the process went on, I had more and more meetings and talking to my coach and all this, I figured out, I don't really know if this is the right company for me, but I was 90% of the way done, so I just finished it. Went in and met with the psychologist who developed it and administered it. And I spent about 2.5 hours with him. And I actually got a ton out of it, a lot more than I'd gotten out of a lot of the 20-minute questionnaires you get from most of them. I've done these a lot. I tend to be pretty self-reflective, and I think I'm pretty aware of who I am. Like, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, I know what I like to do and what I don't. But talking with this guy and after going through all this, just took it to a deeper level. And I had some real realizations, including that wasn't the right company for me while I was talking to him. And that was okay. Like, it wasn't a bad thing. It was, after really, walking through this, I need to reevaluate some of my criteria and say, this is one of them, and this company doesn't meet that criteria.
So, okay, I love that, because 8.5 hours when you figure the testing time and the analysis time together, that might have saved you 6, 12, 18 months, right? I mean, it could have saved you a ton of time. So it was, the reports out there now saying that about half the country are thinking about resigning from their job. People, and it's real. I'm not mocking that, but it's just such a big number. I don't know, how to process that. Let's flip the script here for a second. What are some bad reasons for leaving a job, right? And what arguments would you make maybe to say, hey, you might want to consider sticking around, like this, because I'm afraid that, I guess I'm not going to use fear, but it might be like the grass is green on the other side. COVID burnt me out. Those are all legit. Don't get me wrong. I'm not opposed to people moving on, but sometimes it's done for the wrong reason. Right? And so how would you tackle that?
So people usually leave because they don't feel like they're being treated well. They feel like they're not getting a raise, which they're usually not. And, most companies will pay more for a new rep who doesn't work there than they will their existing high-performing rep. And,
okay.
That's kind of like when you have a cell phone and they'll offer a great deal to a new customer, but as an existing customer, they don't care. So I'm more than happy to change cell phones whenever. Like, they don't show me any loyalty, so I don't show them any. Companies need to make sure they're showing people that they care, that they value them, that they're a good resource for what's going on, and that they want them to succeed. People leave. They always say people leave a bad boss. They don't leave a bad job. And I think there's a lot of things to debate, especially in sales. You can have a bad territory, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if your boss won't or can't take care of you, sometimes there's nothing they can do either. You end up in a situation where you can stay at this job, but you're not going to make any money.
Yeah.
So people say, all right, I can stand here and, bang my head against the wall, or I can look for a new job. At that point, they're like, well, what can I do? And as soon as they look out, people are offering them probably more money than they're already making.
Yeah.
And they see the opportunity. What they're not thinking about oftentimes is, well, all right, what if I get a bad territory there? What if that isn't the most sellable product in the world? What if I'm better at this thing than that thing? And I think people don't often consider enough about what the different companies that are involved, the different, people involved, the different sales motion, the different culture. And things look great on the surface, but if you don't put a lot of time and effort into finding out, you could easily be making a bad move. And so, like, I spent, a month and a half talking to these people, and it wasn't like once a week. It was multiple calls a week with different people. Yeah. And deep diving into competitive landscape, meeting the solution architects, the engineers, the product people, like everybody, to make sure that this is the right place for me. A lot of sales jobs now, especially because people are hiring so fast, you're getting, one interview, and they're like, all right, well, I got another offer. So if you want me, make me an offer. And you don't know each other well enough at that point.
All right.
And I had to laugh because a previous company of mine, I wanted people to do a presentation as the last step. And HR said, well, we don't want to do that because senior people are going to feel like they're being made to work too hard to get the job. And I said, you know what? I'm okay with that. Like, they should work hard to get the job. They should be willing to do that, and we should be willing to support them and give them whatever resources they need. Like, this has got to be a match where we want to be together. I look through a ton of resumes, and I see, for the last 10 years, people have their jobs for 1 to 2 years, over and over and over again.
Oh, tell me about that. Yeah.
And I'm okay with somebody job hopping a couple of times, right? If you do 4 years somewhere, and then you do 1 year here and 1 year there, my hope is that you're now looking for your next spot where you're going to do 4 years.
Yeah, right. You have a track record of stability and staying in with it and so forth. Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And I ask people, and I'll talk to people who have, gaps in the resume, who have a couple of 1 year or 2 year stints, to find out, all right, what are you looking for? What is it that's going to make you stay, and what haven't you found, and how'd you make that decision? And most of the time I find out that they thought they were getting into something they weren't. So they end up in a situation they're not happy with. Sometimes things change. The company got bought out by PE, they changed the way they go to market, whatever. But a lot of the time they jumped into something before they were ready. And the company hired them before they were ready. And so I want to make sure before I hire people, they know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
They understand me, who I am, what our company is, what our product is, what our customers are about. They get it and go, yeah, that's the place I want to be for a while. I think people jump because the grass is greener without really understanding, well, what does it take to make that grass green? And do I want to go do that yard work? Yeah, I live in a downtown condo. I hate yard work. And I'm not looking for that. There's other things I do, right? I have a smaller place. I walk to restaurants. I live in a very different life because this suits me. It's my 7 for 7. I think a lot of people don't actually go deep enough in evaluating that. And they don't turn it back and look at their existing job and go, well, okay, given my criteria that I figured out for my new job, does my current job match that criteria?
Loyalty is interesting, right? Because it goes a little bit both ways, right? So you landed this job. I know that you're very happy where you're at. Very excited about what you're doing. Sometimes after, a competitive situation, you've accepted a job and then some other job offers. It's like when somebody's buying your house, you get some offers on the back end, but you've already accepted the offer. And so, what is your take on that then? Is it, once you're committed? And so any other offers that come in post is for next season? Like, how does that work?
So I'm a little conflicted on this one because, companies will pull an offer if something changes on their end. I was interviewing for one job that I was pretty interested in, and they said, we pulled the offer, not coming back out again. Now, we hadn't negotiated, we hadn't settled on anything, but, I'm 3 interviews down, and they said, we're pulling the offer, or we're pulling the job. And you got to remember, companies are going to do what's best for them, just like, individuals should do what's best for them. But once you make an actual personal connection, once you're like, you know what, I love this guy, he's my boss, I love this woman, she's going to be amazing, whatever that is, I think that becomes a different point because now you're personally committed versus theoretically committed.
Yeah. Okay.
I would be upset if I made an offer to somebody and the next day they say, you know what, I got a better one, I'm leaving. But at the same time, is that really somebody I wanted to have with me? Somebody who doesn't feel, they're not that interested, they're not on the same path as me if that's that easy for them to do. And if it's that easy for me to leave, I'm also not that committed either. So I got my offer in writing. We negotiated everything I asked for, and I still had a couple interviews left to do. And I hadn't signed it, and I hadn't said yes. I said, give me the offer. And I wanted to be very sure before I signed on the dotted line that I was 100% in. So I did my last couple interviews, and in doing those interviews, realized that, yeah, you know what? I found the job that's right for me. By the way, I even got offered a lot more, actually. The day after I got my offer, I got it in writing that morning, and that afternoon, somebody offered me a ton of money to go do something else, but took a step back, thought about it, talked it through with my wife, went through my criteria and realized it wasn't the right job. And the one that I'd already gotten the offer for was. Yeah. So, and once I signed on that dotted line, I was 100% committed.
I love that because
I've decided,
You knew your why. You'd done your homework. You were solid, right? And then you also have peace afterwards, right? I bet you don't think about that offer anymore. I mean, it was great. It's a great anecdotal piece of the story, but it's not something you spend time on. You're at peace with your decision.
I'm good. I briefly considered going back and saying, hey guys, I know you already negotiated with me, but I got offered more money. And then decided, you know what? Money isn't everything. It's nice. It's a good thing and a good part of it. But at that point, I would have felt petty and I would have started the relationship on the wrong foot. And that's not ever any place you want to be, because once you start off that way, it's hard to get things going right again. We negotiated, we both agreed, they came up to meet what I was asking for. At that point, going back asking for a second round of negotiation just felt wrong.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a trust issue, and you moved from relational to commoditizing it again. I get that. And you're right, it's hard to shift out of it at that point. It's hard for them not to view you as a paycheck payer, right?
And that wasn't the relationship I wanted to have. So,
right.
But yeah, right until you sign on the dotted line, you do whatever you want. But when you sign on the line, and you should make sure you're in. And if you're not in, don't sign. It's not the right job, it's not the right company, it's not the right whatever, for whatever reason. But if you're not willing to sign, don't do it.
What's the best question or a couple of great questions that you ask a company or prospective company just to open up more avenue of insight into who they are, either on a personal level or as an organization?
So in this case, I'm talking about a 30-year-old company that is changing from a more traditional business model of being a SaaS company. And I asked a founder CTO, I said, so why are you changing now? What's special about now? Why are you doing it? And how do I know you're committed to making this change? I mean, it's very direct questions. And he actually did a couple of things that were really interesting. One, I was talking to him and our chief product officer at the same time. He deferred to the chief product officer on the product questions. And the style of leadership I tend to believe in is trust your people, support your people, let your people do your stuff. So he actually showed me, rather than tell me, that I trust my people to do the right stuff. But then his answer I thought was really insightful and really hit home with me is, this is a guy who looked at his company and said, we're missing the boat. It's time for us to change. And he went out and not only changed the way the company worked, but hired a new CEO to take over and lead the company. So it was that changing CEO and the CEO hiring an American team, very different than the team they had historically, and saying, this is the way we're going. So they showed me as much as told me how they were going to be different.
Yeah, they telegraphed that.
That's really the kind of stuff I look for. When I ask people questions, it's not just, what are you saying, but how can you show me? How can you back it up and show me what you've done? And that's what you got to look for is, what are those nonverbal things? What are those actions speak louder than words that you can look at and go, yeah, we're on the same page here.